it going, everybody? We welcome you to episode 90. That's right, big one for us. Episode 90 on Hawai'i Football Now. Jordan Helly, Hunter Hughes, with you as always as we record this Wednesday morning, May 17th at about 7 a.m. Hawaii time. Set to release this as usual tomorrow, Thursday, midday. Big thanks to Spectrum Mobile and Hawaii USA Federal Credit Union for sponsoring this episode of HF. And it's a busy one. We've got a lot to get to because a lot has happened over the last week. And every time we think that there's going to be a lull in stuff to talk about for Hunter and I, the University of Hawaii football sort of universe just always gives. There's a lot to talk about here. Some, I think, obviously very monumental with the hiring of, or at least the recommendation for hiring of a new athletic director by UH President David Lassner. We've got some big news in terms of shakeup amongst the coaching staff as well that we will get to throughout the episode of this pod. Hunter, I know you're excited to get into it, but just wanted to kind of get the opening drive started with a little thanks to Logan Taylor last week for jumping on the show. Got a lot of positive feedback about Logan, and he's a guy that no matter what's going on outside, man, that guy's gonna be ultra focused. And it was cool to talk to him because he's come a long way and obviously is now one of, I think, the prominent figures and arguably one of the faces of the program, especially on the defensive side of the football.
Yeah, I think he's one of the more fun characters that we have on our football team right now. In any way that our humble pod can get more exposure to guys like him out there, just to see what kind of individuals we have on our team, in our community. It bodes well, not just for us in the community, but for these guys with NIL deals as well. I would love to see something like that happen for someone like Logan Taylor. You can tell he's incredibly well-spoken, passionate, dynamic. Loved having him on the show, obviously, and excited for a big year with him kind of at the helm of that defense. So excited for sure.
Yeah, he's a guy that they're going to rely heavily on going forward, no doubt about that. All right, before we get into the meat of the pod, because there's a lot to get to, so we'll just jump right into it. I do want to remind everybody that Hawai'i Football Now is brought to you by Hawaii USA Federal Credit Union. Originally opened in 1936 as a credit union for educators, Hawaii USA has inspired a culture of giving that is rooted in education and has since become Hawaii's largest credit union and expanded to other areas of community need that impact financial health, including healthcare, housing, and hunger. To learn more, please visit hawaiiusafcu.com. All right, let's get into it. Game time here on episode 90. Craig Angelos, I believe, is the proper pronunciation of the recommendation for the new athletics director at the University of Hawaii. He is the choice of UH President David Lassner. The big caveat here, and the reason the news broke basically at the time it did, is because the Board of Regents are meeting tomorrow. So when this pod gets released, it'll be right about the time that the Board of Regents is meeting. Looked at the agenda, fairly full agenda. I don't know. I'd imagine they'll get to this probably toward the end of the calendar. That's scheduled for tomorrow, 10 a.m. at Honolulu Community College. And because of the state sunshine law, that agenda had to get posted a week prior. And thus the name was going to come out anyway, right? And so the University of Hawaii put out a press release to announce that this was David Lassner's pick, basically a week ahead of the Board of Regents meeting. If approved, Angelos will start on June 5th. David Matlin's last day is on June 2nd. A little change up from previous athletic director hires, some tweaks to the hiring process for the University of Hawaii. In the past, the only thing the Board of Regents needed to do was approve the salary of the athletic director hire. Now, as we understand it, they have to approve the hire itself, not just the salary. I haven't heard anything, and I know that they're not necessarily allowed to comment, the Board of any of the regents, that is, and really anybody with the University of Hawaii administration not really allowed to comment at this point. There was a pre-release statement, but I haven't heard any rumblings that it could go sideways that there may be pushback or not. I haven't heard anything like that. We'll wait and see. And so I'm assuming that this will go through, and we will proceed as such in talking about Angelos, who is the recommendation here. Before I kind of get your opening thoughts on it, Hunter, just a quick little background on Angelos. He is currently the senior deputy athletic director at Long Island University, basically the number 2 guy at LIU. Folks will remember LIU men's volleyball came down earlier this season, took on the University of Hawaii. I think it was 2 matches at Stan Sheriff Center. They kind of rebranded about 4 years ago when they merged the 2 different Long Island campuses and made it into one. They're the Sharks, very similar to HPU, where HPU rebranded and became the Sharks. Their football program has been FCS level since 2019. They were Division II prior to that. He was previously the athletic director at Florida Atlantic University from 2003 to 2012, so a little while ago, but a substantial amount of time, basically 8 seasons. He was the athletic director there at FAU. FAU familiar to Hawaii fans, if you remember when they were FCS, I believe it was, they were transitioning. They came over to play Hawaii in the June Jones era. More recently garnered fame because of their miraculous, maybe not miraculous, but very impressive run into the Final Four in men's basketball this past March. But anyway, back to Angelos. He was the number 2 also at the University of Miami, Indiana, South Florida, Temple, and now Long Island University. He's also worked at the NCAA as a legislative analyst interpreting NCAA rules and regulations. And his background goes all the way back. He's a Salt Lake City native. And played baseball at BYU. Always fun when you bring some BYU guys into the fold, kind of playfully talking about that there. We can get into a bit more of the details, the minutia, and all this kind of stuff. But on the surface, Hunter, your thoughts on the recommendation from David Lassner that Craig Angelos become the new athletics director for the University of Hawaii?
Before we get into Craig Angelos, the Board of Regents are meeting at Honolulu Community College, Jordan. They couldn't get him at UH Mānoa?
And maybe the conference room is better there. I don't know. I think they might move it around.
Brad, that's my alma mater. I went to HCC for 1 semester. Get him at UH Mānoa. This is a serious decision. Get them out of collegiate.
They might move the meeting around. I'm not sure, because the Board of Regents is for the entire system, right? It's not just for Manoa campus. It's for the entire University of Hawaii system. So they might move the meeting around to different campuses.
They're going to be stuck in Costco traffic for a half hour down there. To me, that's the big L of this conversation. So any of those Board of Regents, if you watch HFN, Hawai'i Football Now for the layman, just move it over to UH. There's nothing going on. School's over. So they've got plenty of classrooms open over there, but just a thought. Back to Craig Angelos. Other than the fact that he played at BYU, Jordan, this guy sounds like a terrific, at least qualified contender for this position. When you look at all the stops that he's had, it looks like he's well suited to be an athletic director. In a lot of these previous stops, he's faced challenges similar to what University of Hawaii is immediately going to be facing. At Florida Atlantic, I was reading up that he oversaw some stadium adjustments on that campus. I believe they even put in a stadium over there. The other one that was interesting was whenever he was at Temple, I believe he oversaw revenue enhancement. And the 2 places that interest me particularly were Long Island and Temple in their comparison to UH, because both of those schools are in a heavy metropolitan area, and overseeing certain things for an athletic program in a crowded urban environment just brings about certain challenges that you don't get at other Power 5 universities that basically have their own town. Playing ball with the community and legislature, permits, construction, all that kind of stuff in a crowded urban environment brings about its certain challenges. And so I like that about this guy's resume probably most of all, other than the fact that he's just kind of been anywhere and everywhere in the group of five schools. Like he's been in a lot of mid majors, which is also encouraging for us. Yeah, I don't know much about him personally, Jordan. Read an article that says he's a family man. He's got 6 kids, which is kind of par for the course with a BYU boy, if you will. But yeah, I'm excited to get to know this guy a little bit more and see what happens.
Yeah, to your point, some of the big I think selling points is he was very front and center of a stadium development at FAU, pivotal in the development, more specifically of a 30,000 seat facility on campus at Florida Atlantic University. This was a number of years ago. I think it was completed in like 2010, 2011, something like that. Basically also included some facilities, some dorms on campus as well. In total, the project was $160 million. 70 million of that went to the building of the stadium. And so that is something that he has on his resume, and obviously I think will pique the interest of a lot of University of Hawaii fans because of the stadium situation we are in, right? And I don't know the footprint on campus and what that looks like in comparison to lower campus at the University of Hawaii, but he is a guy who's done that. I will say a $70 million stadium. I get it. It was like over a decade ago. But we're looking at, I don't know what it would cost to get something like that on campus at the University of Hawaii. We do know that, Aloha Stadium, which is a much different animal because it's not the universities, it would be the states, is we're looking at like $500 million, right? So might be a little apples to oranges there, but ultimately he has been successful in driving a capital campaign there on campus, and maybe very capable of taking the baton from David Matlin in terms of continuing the capital improvement projects there at the University of Hawaii, because they still have to figure out exactly how far they're going to build out Ching. They do, I think, fully intend to complete the soccer field, right, with stands that will include the track there on what is now the grass practice fields there adjacent to the Rainbow Wahine softball stadium. And so, he's a guy who's got that track record. Obviously, he's been touted for some of his fundraising and things of the like. It's kind of interesting. He was there for a while at Florida Atlantic. There were reports when he was let go, right? It's always kind of hard to tell exactly why an administrator is let go. It also kind of timed up with a new president coming in, maybe wanting to hire their own athletic director at FAU. But, he's got an impressive resume. I think that is for sure. My biggest thing, and I will start everything by saying this, and I agree, and we've heard some others in, the local media kind of, I think, express this as well. Like, whatever you think of the hire, we really all got to hope that the dude is very successful, because this is such a pivotal time, right? I know our guy Kanoa Leahy has sort of mentioned this in interviews and whatnot, but it's like, I don't know the man at all, but I really hope that he is successful and comes in and knocks it out of the park, to use the baseball analogy, because he's a baseball guy, because I don't know if the University of Hawaii can afford not to be successful in this hire, right? Because of where things currently stand in terms of the football team kind of being a team without a program, without a home, the longer and longer delays of Aloha Stadium, the ever-changing landscape of conference realignment and where that's going to go, and everything in between. And so they need to get this right. The University of Hawaii needs to get this right. And whether it's Angelos approved tomorrow by the Board of Regents, or if it's somebody else, again, I think it's going to be Craig. Like we need that person to be successful. We need that person to be able to take this situation, this athletic department, and take it to the next level. And so I will preface everything by saying that my biggest takeaway to all of this was I was just really surprised. I was really surprised that it wasn't somebody with direct ties to Hawaii. Somebody who had either spent time at the University of Hawaii, somebody who had direct ties just to the islands itself. I was just surprised by that. I'm not saying it's a necessarily like a gigantic red flag that he doesn't. Would I have preferred that? Yeah, I think we've talked about it, right? Especially a lot of these same conversations we've had with the head football coach position at the University of Hawaii, somebody who has a little institutional knowledge, just because of not necessarily, well, one, because of all the special aspects of the University of Hawaii, of the athletic department and all of that, but also you got to kind of know how messed up things are, how much of a bit of a minefield it is operating within the bureaucracy that sort of exists in Hawaii, operating with some of the power players that, for better or worse, are in positions to dictate and control purse strings, like just all of that. So I'm just a little surprised that it wasn't somebody who had. Now, you can very well make the argument that, look, that's a good thing. This guy doesn't have any preconceived notions. This guy's coming in, arguably outside the box a little bit. This guy can come in and come in clean slate, right? Blank slate. I think you can make that argument. And a guy who's been at a number of different institutions and has the background of at least looking at things, differently, different spots that he made I hadn't considered. I think it's a great point by you, Hunter, the fact that, he's been at a couple of pretty urban institutions, which, the University of Hawaii is in a pretty dense location, right? When it comes to just population and buildings and the urban nature that it really is, and how that's going to kind of impact things for him and how he goes about planning. I'm curious to see what his vision is. I'm curious to see how he plans to kind of incorporate things from his previous stops into the University of Hawaii, right? Because we've always, I think, been very pro kind of, exploring different ways, like not necessarily sticking with the status quo when it comes to media rights, when it comes to where they play, when it comes to looking outside the box in terms of conference affiliation, all those kinds of things. So it'll be pretty interesting. He's got all of those stops were like east of the Mississippi. So I just thought, I don't know if that really matters for anything, but it's kind of interesting that, basically his entire administrative career has been in the Eastern time zone. And now he's coming like as far west as you could possibly do it in Division I collegiate athletics. So yeah, I was pretty surprised. I don't know for better or worse, but I was just surprised that it wasn't somebody with a more direct connection to Hawaii. And again, maybe that's not a bad thing.
Yeah. I think it's interesting with the times with where UH has been, what UH has kind of been through these last 3 or 4 years with similar discussions. I think we all that are associated or connected with the football program are more on the sensitive side to hire someone from the mainland because of everything that just went down with the previous head coaching hire. I don't know if I would quite throw the baby out with the bathwater with completely eliminating the mainland, although it would be nice to have someone with the same sort of credentials with some sort of Hawaii tie in a perfect world. People can learn culture. The majority, like a lot of our coaching staff on University of Hawaii right now, they've taken on this learning need to listen first, speak second, a humility about them. Someone I think about right away is Coach Sheffield, completely adopting this culture. Coach Cook himself, his daughter has a Hawaiian name now, given to her by a teacher, a kumu out here. And I bring those people up just, it can be learned. Myself, I'm not originally from here, but I like to think of this place as home, and I am from this place. I'm a part of the community. Um, I've just heard a lot of people immediately writing this guy off because of the fact that he's not from here, and I don't know if I'd quite go that far. Let's remember who was on the search committee. Previous players, business people in the community, current University of Hawaii coaches that are going to have to work under and with this guy, Laura Beeman and Charlie Wade. To me, that speaks to something. These guys not only believe in his resume, but they believe in him as a person. I would hope and pray that they interviewed this guy, they talked with him, that they got to know him as a person a little bit. And in some ways, I kind of want to just trust the process a little bit, or this process on how they went about in finding these people, and ultimately dropping a recommendation to David Lassner, and then the recommendation to the Board of Regents. So I hear everything that you're kind of bringing, Jordan. It's just I kind of want to trust the process, and we've waited long enough. At this point, we absolutely need someone, because this buffer zone that I thought we were going to have between David Natlin still kind of in office and then this new person kind of being shown the ropes, we're not going to have any of that kind of carryover time, which I was hoping we were going to get. But at this point, we just almost need to hire the stinking candidate and get on with everything, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, no, I hear you. I hear you. And I'm in agreement. I don't think this guy should be just Craig Angelos should just be completely written off or anything like that. Again, I hope he's the guy for the job. And I think there's a lot of things to be excited about in what he's accomplished in his previous stops. And I totally concur. I think, anybody coming in can sort of open their hearts and take in the culture and whatnot. And that's not the part that worries me, right? I'm gonna assume positive intent with any of these hires. The thing that I think is the learning curve to me is so much more the bureaucratic side of things, like just figuring out how to operate within a system that sort of exists within Hawaii, whether it's at the university, whether it's at the state legislature, whether it's the entire sphere altogether. Like it's a little messy, and it's not a well-oiled machine. And that to me is that learning curve is what concerns me more than anything else. I'm fully confident that whether it's Angelos or anybody else can come in, and if they're willing to kind of embrace things, and we've seen that from a number of hires, whether coaches, whether administrators, I think is a good, Hawaii kind of almost it's almost inherent, like you got to do it right, otherwise you're not going to last here. And so, and you mentioned the process, right? And some of that, some of that bureaucracy that I mentioned is like, yeah, I don't know what the timeline was and what their restraints were, what kind of handcuffs the process, right? It's like, yeah, it would have been nice to kind of have him in place, but I know also because you're dealing with state public positions, like you can't necessarily hire him to start anytime sooner than when the previous guy vacates his job, right? Like there's a whole kind of thing. But anyway, the process for it all, that Hunter touched on, just to kind of lay that out there. The 8-person search advisory committee reviewed, this is all per a media release from the University of Hawaii, extensively reviewed over 60 applications, confirmed with Hunter that he was not one of those 60 applicants. They followed the standard University of Hawaii practice, under which 8 to 10 of the most qualified applicants are selected for interviews based on credentials and experience. And then from that point, after they go through 8 to 10 interviews or interviewing of 8 to 10 applicants from the search committee. They then forward 3 to 5 names to the president, to the supervisor of the position. That's the president of the University of Hawaii. That's David Lassner. In an unranked list with strengths and weaknesses of each finalist. After meeting with the search advisory committee, Lassner interviewed each of the finalists and selected Angelos as his recommendation to the Board of Regents. And then they also included the recommendation memo to the board also includes a description of what is expected of the next athletics director. And I'll read from this because this is how David Matlin views the position, right? Director of Athletics must model integrity at the highest level, promote gender equity, inclusion, and diversity as they encourage and support a multicultural environment grounded in Hawaii and carefully manage budget challenges by generating new revenues and containing costs. They must build and maintain effective and productive relationships with other academic institutions, athletic conferences, national intercollegiate athletics organizations, and the diverse athletic stakeholders within Hawaii and beyond. Even before the monumental shifts in intercollegiate athletics nationally, this position has been characterized as one of the most visible and challenging positions in the state. I would agree. It's just kind of general speak, right? That's nothing in terms of real clear-cut, tangible expectations. The recommended salary is basically flat. It's the same as David Matlin's, $325,212. It also does include a $15,000 relocation moving allowance on top of that. It's an at-will position, appointed position, basically, right? Can be hired and fired at any time. Any future raises or anything like that will have to go through the Board of Regents and their policy. So that was the process. I'm real curious to know who else applied. I'm real curious to know who the 8 to 10 interviewees were by the search committee. I'm real curious to know who the 3 to 5 finalists were. Again, they kind of give you a round number. They don't necessarily give you the specifics. And so I'd be really curious to find out. I don't know what they can officially tell us, right? It's like, well, they apply, but they move on. They have some privacy rights and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, so I'd be curious to know who else was in there. And I'm sure we'll have some media availability, and the question will be asked as to how exactly David Lassner got down to Craig Angelos.
Yeah, and his connection to Howard Schnellenberger is pretty interesting. If those watching have watched any of the 30 for 30, Schnellenberger incredibly instrumental with the creation of what we know as the U at Miami. So just if you're a fan of college football, that's kind of Mount Rushmore territory of famous coaches right there. That's pretty cool. But I had a question for you, Jordan. When you look at expectations or how we judge our next athletic director, it's not like a head coach where you look at the success of their seasons. How do we judge Angelos if this guy is the one that is selected by the Board of Regents, of course? How do we judge him in his first 6 months, year in the position with being a successful AD?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because I think you look at it differently, right? Whether it's based on the first 6 months, whether it's based on the first year, whether it's based on, the first several years, because I think ultimately, right, so much of it is going to depend on off the field stuff, whether it's figuring out the stadium situation. I think that's probably the biggest thing, whether it's on campus, whether it's the new Aloha Stadium. That's probably going to be the biggest thing for him in the immediate future, right? Whether that's just getting something, and obviously they're not going to build Aloha Stadium in the first 6 months or the first year, but just working with the power players at the states, working with the stakeholders to just come up with a plan, right? Just something. And we know it's not going to happen for another 5 years at minimum. But just to come up with a path forward, I think is going to be huge. And so much of that is out of his control, right? So much of that is out of the University of Hawaii's control. I get it. But he's going to have to be able to work those rooms. He's going to have to be able to, coordinate. He's going to have to be able to talk to the right people to get something going, right? Or is it, they say, the hell with it. Do what you want. we're going to figure it out on campus. I got a 30,000 seat stadium built, at FAU. Let's do that. Let's get 20,000. Let's get 25,000, whatever it is on lower campus. David, take the baton from David Matlin and move forward and get everything. So whatever it is, right? That's going to be huge. Fundraising is going to be huge. How do they take this into the modern era, right? How do they continue to create NIL pathways for students, for recruits? How does money, right? It's all going to come down to that. How do you raise funds? How do you raise NIL opportunities? How do you continue to do that? And then, revenue streams, whether it's fundraising, whether it's media rights deals, whether it's partnerships, for other avenues, whether that's, and I think that kind of springboards into conference affiliation, right? When it comes to paying travel subsidies, when it comes to, conference payouts from bowl games, from NCAA tournament appearances and all that kind of stuff. Obviously the Big West is a fairly stable home for the majority of the programs at the University of Hawaii, but for the football program, the Mountain West right now is, who knows what happens with realignment with San Diego State, with Fresno State, with Colorado State, with Air Force, with Boise. What does that look like? How proactive can the University of Hawaii be in making sure it has a stable home moving forward? That'll be huge. So I think it's really kind of that three-pronged evaluation rubric, if you will, and there's a ton of crossover between all three when it comes to stadium, fundraising, everything that kind of revenue that falls under that, and conference realignment. I think those are the three biggest things, and that's probably an ongoing evaluation, right? In the short term, and then obviously the other aspect of it is hiring and firing coaches, right? Ultimately, you got to be able to select good ones. You got to be able to move on from ones that aren't getting the job done. As it currently stands, I think at most of the major programs for the University of Hawaii, there is a fair amount of continuity and enough success where nobody's going to be clamoring for a firing right away. I think maybe the only one would be men's basketball, where it's like, okay, where's that program going right now? But that's a whole nother conversation for another day. But ultimately, that's kind of the other big thing, right? And I don't know if that's a short-term evaluation, kind of like you asked. So, but yeah, curious to see what you think on that, and we can get into some of his hires at FAU. I did have a little bit on that, but I'll kind of pause that for now, Hunter, and kind of get your thoughts on how we would, whether it's Craig Angelos or anybody else, right? I think it's a great question as to what success looks like. How do you hold, or how do you evaluate the performance of that position?
Yeah, it's funny because you can't really hold this guy responsible for many of the issues that he's kind of being thrown right into. One of which being the continued expansion on Ching, where they're hoping to get an additional, I think, close to 5,000 seats by the start of this season, something around that ballpark. They're working on that right now, so it's not really on him on the success of that specific project. One thing that I could look at specifically is whether or not he helps get that stinking scoreboard put on the back of the less, which would be used at the Ching complex as well. But that's been kind of the elephant in the room for the Ching project is, are they going to have that ready and up by the time we play our home opener against Stanford? And so we're not, I don't know. I think I look at that one. I also look at the project of what they're going to do with the grass field for women's soccer and girls track. So I look at that renovation as something that is directly going to have this guy's signature on it. And then you mentioned it, Jordan. I think it comes down to his first coaching fire and hire. That's kind of the only thing as of right now that I can foresee is having an immediate connection to this guy's tenure. So until then, it's more lobbying, it's making relationships, it's trying to find some strategic corporate partnerships that will help just help the future of University of Hawaii athletics. So yeah, I almost would hope that we would distance ourselves from the Aloha Stadium project right now and just hunker down and make lower campus awesome, because that's what we can do right now.
Yeah, and maybe that's something that the higher ups at the University of Hawaii are targeting because of this guy's background, right? It could be, but those are all questions that I think can and will be asked of President Lassner, of potentially Mr. Angelos at tomorrow's meeting from the media, perhaps following that as well. I think you're so right. So many of these things are just, and that's why I kind of go back to, it's like, is it fair that he inherits a lot of this junk? No, not really. But at the end of the day, he's the guy being chosen, right, to kind of navigate all of this, and you gotta produce results, knowing that in a lot of ways you're stepping into a position where you're behind the 8 ball, not because it's your fault, but because that's kind of the situation that is just exists for you there. And so as we look at it, as you mentioned, when you look at the hirings and the firings, we mentioned, Howard Schnellenberger. He was brought in at FAU to start the football program. I think it was 2001. So he predates, or his tenure at FAU predated Angelos's by a couple of years. I don't know exactly what that dynamic was, reading some articles and things like that. It sounded like Coach Schnellenberger had a lot of autonomy, as you would imagine. Not dissimilar, I think, to June Jones during his time at the University of Hawaii. But Schnellenberger is like a legend down there, right? And obviously FAU in close proximity to the University of Miami, and all the success that he had getting the U going, and had some really good seasons at FAU, and kind of petered out by the end.
He owned Florida, Jordan. Like, that was the big thing with Schnellenberger, was they owned Florida.
Yeah. So, he could recruit, man. He could recruit.
The community buy-in and the community respect of that guy, I'm sure he had so much influence down there.
Yeah, exactly. And so I don't know, how much Angelos was kind of limited by, the fact that Schnellenberger had a very oversized presence on that campus. And so some of the other the noteworthy hires, I will say, for Angelos at FAU, after some quick research, he was reportedly given full autonomy to hire Schnellenberger's replacement. I believe that means basically no search committee or whatever. He chose Carl Pelini, Bo Pelini's brother, right, who was the defensive coordinator for Bo under at Nebraska at the time, and this was in 2012 after Schnellenberger's retirement. And it was the second coach ever in program history. That didn't go well. Pelini went 5-14 in less than 2 full seasons. He resigned due to some off the field stuff in the process. And then in hoops, I believe the timeline lines up where he hired Matt Doherty, former North Carolina guy, was there for 1 year, had a winning record, then left to go to SMU. He hired Rex Walters, who had a couple of really successful seasons. He left to go take a bigger job as well. So he had some success hiring basketball coaches. And then he hired Mike Jarvis, most notably former St. John's head coach, to take over. He had some mixed results. Jarvis was still the basketball coach when Angelos's contract was not renewed. So you got the one football hire. He had basically hired 3 basketball coaches, Ben's basketball coaches at the time. And then baseball is arguably FAU's most successful sport. Like, they've been pretty good for 40 years. A lot of talent down there in Southern Florida. They had a really long time head coach retire in 2009. And so he hired his replacement, and he was basically the top assistant. He promoted baseball's top assistant there. That was John McCormack, who is still the FAU baseball coach, 14 years later. And so, obviously a successful hire there, but did kind of keep it in-house, and just the program that was already very established from prior administrations, from decades prior. I kind of kept that ball rolling. So just kind of, for a little sample size, it's not a huge sample size of hirings during his time. Obviously, ideally, he won't have to fire or hire anybody anytime soon, because the programs are all doing a ton of winning. That's not always the case, right? We know the reality of it all going forward there. But I think overall, he's got an extensive resume, right? He's been an athletic administrator for a long time, a long time, and was an AD at a Division I institution over 20 years ago, right? And so he's seen a lot of the changes over the last 2 decades, really this century, over the course of intercollegiate athletics. You can find
email it, Jordan.
Before you,
all the way back to the early 90s when you and I were born.
Yeah, it's a long time ago, man. That is for sure. And so we'll learn a lot more tomorrow. If something goes sideways at the Board of Regents meeting, I'm sure we'll hop on an emergency pod or something like that. But again, I haven't heard anything that would lead you to believe that he won't be confirmed. And so, once after tomorrow's Board of Regents meeting, we'll learn a lot more. And I think next week's episode, we can get into a little bit more of our unanswered questions, if we will, for both Hunter and I. I think we'll learn a lot more there, and eventually, hopefully, get him on the podcast or something like that down the road throughout the summer, after he comes on board in June, if indeed approved by the Board of Regents tomorrow. Any final kind of comments, questions, whatever, Hunter, on Angelos before we take a quick halftime break here? I know we've gone on for kind of a while here, but I figured we would.
If the Board of Regents has wasted all of this time and doesn't go with this guy, and they prolong the process even more, I see that as incredibly irresponsible. I would be shocked if they don't go with this guy. It would not be doing University of Hawaii a service. If that were to happen, I would hope it would be for some very, very good reasons. Josh Pacheco and I had some conversations earlier last week on, would the Board of Regents not, go with this selection as a critique towards David Lassner? And if they even went down that avenue, Jordan, that would just be such a waste of time to me, where we have issues that need handling right now. Let's put this person in place. He certainly has the resume to back it up. I would be shocked if we heard anything otherwise.
Yeah, and we'll know shortly, right? As you listen to this podcast, if you're listening to it when we release it, those conversations might be going on at the very same time. I believe they stream those Board of Regents meetings, or some of the recordings are available. We'll try to see if we can find that for next week and point you in the right direction for that. All right, we'll take a quick halftime and then a little abbreviated second half when we return right here on episode 90, Hawai'i Football Now.
This is Hawai'i Football Now from ESPN Honolulu.
All right, back with you, second halftime here on Hawai'i Football Now. We move on from the athletic director conversation to some changes on the University of Hawaii football staff. Stephen Tsai, I believe, was first to report that Abe Elimimian will be leaving the Hawaii football coaching staff. Abe, who we've had on the show, I think a couple of different times, one of the mainstays He's a guy who served under 5 different head coaches at the University of Hawaii, going back to Norm Chow, right? Technically, one of them was an interim, and Chris Niole, but was held over by Rolo, was held onto by Todd Graham, Timmy Chang, who was his teammate at the University of Hawaii in their playing days, when Abe was a terrific defensive back. Had remained with the program over 8 seasons. This would have been his 9th. Had sort of been the one mainstay, the one constant in the program. Has coached a number of different positions. Has coached on both sides of the football, right? Remember when he was coaching running backs for a time? It's kind of amazing that I think we all took for granted that Abe would kind of just be there throughout. I haven't heard a ton as to why, what the impetus is for this, whether he's going, whether he's departing for another opportunity. I guess overall, we haven't heard much as to why this is taking place. But again, reported, confirmed by some sources as well in a couple of different media reports. But Stephen Cyphers reporting that Coach Abe is apparently no longer going to be a part of the coaching staff. And I think overall came as a big surprise to a lot of people, myself included.
Yeah. Before I get into any other talk, I just want to say thanks to Coach Abe. He was my coach, was there whenever I walked on and made the team under Coach Chow. He was there with Rolo whenever I was a scout team guy. Spent a lot of time with Coach Abe. Actually, he would pull me over and have me throw to the DBs. And so don't often have a lot of face-to-face interaction as a quarterback with a DB coach, but just my journey at UH was kind of unique in that capacity, and spent a lot of time with Coach Abe, and refreshingly would not get emotional at practice, and was just a place of calmness and peace. And I don't say that to say he didn't take his job seriously, because he absolutely did. And you wouldn't be around a Division I program for close to 9 years if you weren't good at your job. But oftentimes football practices are highly emotional environments, highly just intense. And Coach Abe was a refreshing kind of switch from that. And we as players absolutely loved him. I have regarded him, Jordan, as probably one of UH's strongest recruiters over close to the last decade, especially when you look at the different positions that he's overseen. Yeah, and I know that sentiment can be shared by multiple guys who have called University of Hawaii home. Coach Abe meant so much to the program, was connected in the community as well. One of the restaurants I used to do valet at whenever I was in college, I'd see him and Big Rob Kikaula frequent there all the time. And he just was beloved by anybody as a player, coach, media personality around that program. Abe was very significant to our program. He's not just another position coach. He meant a hell of a lot more to us and to the program than that. And him and his brother are kind of like football royalty when you think about UH. So yeah, I really hope it just means greener pastures for him. I hope it means that he's able to step up in his career, because this was home for him for a long time. I can only hope that bigger and better things are ahead of him, because he absolutely deserves it.
Yeah, I'm with you. The guy who's given a ton to the university, a guy who has been huge in recruiting, that cannot be understated. And really the only comment officially that we've seen on anything is Coach Abe tweeting out yesterday morning, simply, "I love the University of Hawaii." That's all that's really been put out there. I don't think the school has necessarily put out anything other than a UH spokesperson confirming to our guy Brian McInnes of Spectrum News yesterday that Abe is leaving the program. I don't know. Again, we don't know if that's his choice, somebody else's choice. There hasn't been a whole lot out there, and again, the only thing I know that Abe has put out there publicly is that simple tweet. I love the University of Hawaii. So, yeah, I don't know. A strange, I guess. I think raised a lot of eyebrows. You hope it's nothing other than better opportunities, as you pointed out, greener pastures, Hunter. So we'll learn more, I'm sure, as the weeks go on, and if there is anything more to share, we will definitely be discussing it here on the pod. Of course, that now leaves them, right, the departure of basically the two defensive backs, secondary coaches here recently, and so we'll see what the staff looks like going forward as well. Sorry, Hunter, before we move on, do you have anything else on Coach Abe before we kind of get into the comments and close this out?
Yeah, my only thought is the guys that he recruited to come here. I'd love for them to stay. There was some concern about Cam Stone, the transfer from Wyoming, removing University of Hawaii from his social media. I don't look too much into that right now. It just shifted from University of Hawaii DB to Mountain West DB or something like that. So I don't look too much into that as being a tell that he's gone. But Coach Abe meant a lot to the guys that he recruited, and those relationships are usually the glue that keeps people stayed. And so that's my only thought. But it's not impossible to keep those guys there. That's my one concern with a guy like him leaving.
That's big. That's big, right? And so much of that is relationships, much more than place sometimes. And hopefully things kind of steady for the roster as well. All right, getting into some of your comments. Appreciate everybody as well. The last few episodes, shout out to our guy Colin Schaefer, who dropped us a line a couple of episodes ago, doing a lot of great work on the video side for the program as well. Our guy Al from VA dropping a lot of thoughts. Joe Lopez dropping us a line. Shout out to Joe. Our guy King Kato, I think his YouTube handle, he asked, are they still planning on building a new stadium, or are they planning on remodeling the old stadium? Last we knew, they're still planning on building a new stadium. We had the Steven Side column. I think it was Steven or somebody put it out there, right? It's like, well, if it's going to take this long and this much money to build a new one, maybe we just look at refurbishing or renovating the old one. And then another commenter, 518 Colio, mentioned, I like the old stadium. I did too. So the stadium stuff, we can't really give you any straight answers on most of this going forward. It sounds like our guy Al for VA was at the UH volleyball game in Fairfax, which only makes sense based on some of his comments. I apologize, Al, if I'm misrepresenting here, but he said it was, awesome crowd. Hawaii way more than he thought than some of the outside estimates. He thought there was like over 5,000 of the roughly 7,000 record-breaking championship game attendance, representing Hawaii, and especially in comparison to the crowd for a big program like UCLA. He also threw out the idea that Hawaii football should have had a football camp out there in the DMV in conjunction with the volleyball team being out there. I love that Al's always thinking outside the box. He's like, they got all these Hawaii guys that are sort of out there in the metro area. Like, let's get Coach Nate back out there, right, where he's from. And it's like, I always like that he's kind of thinking outside the box
He's
here.
in the
Even
lab.
throughout after we had Coach Cook on, he's like, we got to expand his talents just outside of football, man. He's too valuable for that. Create a little a Pan-Pacific sort of training facility to get all these athletes in there and take advantage of Coach Cook's skill set. I was like, I love this, man.
Al from VA is always cooking,
man. I love that. Also gave credit to Hunter for the EON acronym for Eddie Osei Gatia the signing from down under. So we appreciate all the commenters as always. I wanted to give the shout out, and we appreciate the chef that is Al from VA, always in the lab.
Absolutely. Yeah, the dude every once in a while has some good ideas, Jordan. I gotta give it to him. That's not a bad idea. I remember Rollo tried to capitalize off of something similar whenever we went down to Australia. And whenever we played Cal down there, they held a camp in partnership kind of with Scott Harding and the rugby kind of tie down there, and it ended up producing Stan Gaudian. That's how we found Stan. So these things can produce fruit. That's certainly not a bad idea. I wanted our new AD to be at that national championship for volleyball. That was, to me, a missed opportunity, at least just from an optics point of view of that's one of the biggest stages that University of Hawaii athletics has, going for a third straight national championship. If we are moving towards a new athletic director, seeing Lassner, Matlin, and then the new AD incumbent, that was a blown opportunity for me in terms of PR and the timing that I wanted to see from this process.
Yeah, I hear you. Yeah, the building some of that continuity, right? And obviously with the national championship for volleyball kind of taking place nicely at the end of the school year, or the sports calendar for 2022-2023. All right, kind of wrapping things up, quick little 2-minute drill. Want to give a shout out to Stefan Bernal Went, signed with the Utah Warriors of Major League Rugby. So he's making the switch back to rugby. Those North Shore boys, man, that's what they grew up playing. And it's pretty cool playing professional rugby, Major League Rugby. The league continues to grow, very high level, and really awesome. Hey, man, again, anytime you can point to recruits and say that, hey, you come to the University of Hawaii, we'll help you get to play professional, whatever it is, whether it's football or rugby for some of these guys as well. That's pretty cool. Awesome to Stefan, and we wish him the best.
Absolutely. Another former teammate, Lance KK Williams, is still playing pro rugby. I believe, I think on that same Utah team, believe it or not.
Okay.
So yeah, almost maybe a pipeline being created in alternative sports, Jordan. I like that for former UH players. Stefan's going to probably need to get on the track a little bit, because rugby, there's certainly a lot more cardio than the O-line at UH, but I'm sure he's going to be well suited whenever he gets there. He's a hard worker.
Oh yeah, man, it's going to go quick, and I think it's going to go well for him up there. We'll keep an eye out on that. So we can't just pay attention to the growing number of professional football leagues. We got to pay attention to Major League Rugby and some of the other stops as well for these guys. That's just terrific. All right, fun conversation. Big moment in the University of Hawaii athletics program, trying to figure out what the path is going forward. We'll get the update tomorrow from the Board of Regents as well, and should have a lot to talk about next week, again right here on Hawai'i Football Now. Big thanks to Spectrum Mobile, Hawaii USA Federal Credit Union, our guy Jonathan on the controls. Shout out to Hunter, as always, bringing the good stuff, and mahalos to all the listeners out there as well. We'll see you back here next week, episode 91 on the docket here on Hawai'i Football Now. Take care, everybody.
You've been listening to Hawai'i Football Now with Jordan Helly and Hunter Hughes, all from ESPN Honolulu.